In this episode, we speak with Chris Hadley, Managing Director at Berkshire Partners, a 100% employee-owned investor in private and public equity. The private equity team invests in well-positioned, growing companies across business and consumer services, healthcare, industrials, and technology and communications. Founded in 1986, Berkshire is currently investing from its Fund 11, which closed in 2024 with $7.8 billion in commitments. The firm has completed over 150 investments and is known for partnering closely with management teams to drive growth across market cycles. A leader within the firm's healthcare investment team, Chris has demonstrated exceptional leadership and strategic insight over his 27-year tenure. Known for his unique ability to build trust and foster collaboration, he has earned the respect of peers and portfolio company management teams alike, and was recognized by GrowthCap as a top healthcare investor of 2025. I'm your host, RJ Lumba. We hope you enjoy the show. If you like the episode, click to follow.
RJ Lumba is the managing partner of GrowthCap and the executive chairman of Market Insight Media. He is the host of Growth Investor, a podcast featuring today's best investors, executives, and founders. In the minutes ahead, we'll uncover insights and strategies for accelerating growth and succeeding in business.
Chris, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. It's a delight to be with you.
Great to be with you. You've interviewed a number of my friends in the industry, so very pleased to be here. Thank you.
Where I'd like to kick off is Berkshire's history. You know, the name Berkshire Partners has been one of high repute, and many folks I know in the industry do always like to reference the good work you're doing in the private equity space. And your firm has been around for a long time. So maybe we could start with a little bit of background on Berkshire.
Yeah, sure. And thank you for those kind words. And, remarkable start by five founders who get all the credit, I think, for what you just said. Back in 1986, we're coming up on our 40th anniversary in a year. I had the good fortune of working with all five of those founders. And, the values that they put in place, the framework and structure they put in place 40 years ago, we've tweaked, we've maybe made some improvements upon to, deal with the growth in the firm. But those core values are what drive our decisions internally and externally every single day, how we work with ourselves, how we hold ourselves accountable, and how we engage with our portfolio companies. And I can touch on those a bit in a minute. Some of the stats over 40 years, we're on our 11th fund. I think our AUM is close to 27 billion on the private equity side, 150 investments over those 40 years, which is interesting to think about. A lot of wonderful partnerships formed. About 15 years ago, we added a public equity arm called Stockbridge. It's a long-only equity fund. It's been a really complementary set of capabilities for Berkshire Partners on the whole. We don't have any walls up between the two organizations. Our teams work freely back and forth. So if we find something interesting on the private side, it could be interesting on the public side and vice versa. Obviously, we do everything from a compliance standpoint, but having kind of two product capabilities, private and public, in a lot of the same sectors has been very, very helpful and a wonderful addition. As we think about those 40 years, 35 portfolio companies, and really 4 industry sectors. So business and consumer services, industrials, tech and comms, and then healthcare, which is where I spend the vast majority of my time. So those are some of the stats. I really, again, give credit to those 5 founders. I think we try to think a lot about how they set the business up culturally and structurally. Culturally, there are really 3 things we think about. 1, relationships matter. These will sound like easy things to say, but when you think about 40 years, we have relationships that go back 40 years. I've been at the firm 27 years. I have relationships that go back 27 years that are very important. I hope to have relationships that go forward, maybe not 27 years, but a while longer. And those relationships internally with our management teams, with all the third parties that surround us, and certainly our limited partners, are most important to us. The power of teams, we talk a lot about. We've never had a partner in the corner office. We run ourselves as a partnership. We make decisions as a partnership. That was really the structural approach that the 5 founders put in place. Yes, we have committees that allow us to govern ourselves. We rotate through those committees to make sure that we can run effectively as an organization, but we still run it very much as a flat partnership, making decisions together. And then we have a series of teams within those teams. So we've got our private equity team, we've got our 4 industry groups, we've got our portfolio support group, and all of the functional teams that are very good around that. And then combined with Stockbridge, IR, on and on and on. And so the idea of one team made up of a series of teams, all rowing the same boat to the same outcome. And structurally, all of our economics are based on the performance of the fund, not an industry group, not a particular investment, not a period in time. It's really how does the fund perform? And so we're all working as one big team to make sure that that is the best outcome. That obviously leads to a really good outcome for our limited partners. Turns out that we, the firm and the partnership, are the largest single investor. We always have been the largest single investor. We think that's very motivating and helps us be 100% aligned with our LP partners. So that's kind of how it's worked. We've tweaked it. It's come together quite nicely. And then the last value that we think a lot about is just winning the right way. Just being able to make sure that we can look each other in the eye, have a conversation with you and have conversations with our management teams and our family and friends and say, this is how we go to market. This is how we engage, so that we continue to have people, like you just did, say really nice things about the culture and the engagement of Berkshire. So thank you again for that. But I feel very fortunate to be 27 years into 40 years and surrounded by tremendous people throughout the firm. And again, credit to those 5 founders for putting us in this place.
The idea of setting values and having a strong culture and team orientation is easily said, not easily executed, but you've managed to do it within your firm. There's some magic to it. And I've interviewed hundreds of investors, spoken with, probably over 1,000 investors, going back to my investment banking days. And it's palpable when you interact with a firm that has a good culture. Berkshire seems to have that. I was refreshing myself and looking at even the video you have on your site. What else could you tell us, like maybe some unique insights about how you've been able to develop this culture?
Well, I'm smiling because thank you again. It's nice to hear. I say a lot to younger folks when we hire them and we bring them in and we're training and we're talking about how we engage, that it takes a lot of work to build and maintain and protect a culture. And it takes very little to have it be torn down. It's amazing how if you let certain activities or behaviors or influences take hold, it can undermine 40 years of really good cultural protection very quickly. So I think everyone in the firm almost feels appreciative, lucky, fortunate to have come into that culture, works very hard to protect that culture. It's a big reason why people choose to come to Berkshire. I'll talk about that a little bit more. And so there is a mindset of we're fortunate to be here. We have to be very careful to protect it. And let's hold ourselves accountable to make sure that if anyone's not, and everyone has moments of weakness and we all have moments where we're maybe not at our best, and just reminding each other of why we're there as one big team to do things together and win together. And it starts with recruiting. I say to a lot of my friends in private equity who are tremendously successful, you are tremendously successful in your firm. I don't know that you would love working in Berkshire's environment. The way that you engage works really well for you. I'm not sure it would be a perfect fit here. And for some of us at Berkshire Partners, we might not be a perfect fit in other places. It doesn't mean that those other places haven't been tremendous investors and wonderful firms and great places to work, just different. I think when we're interviewing, we're looking for folks who are competitive, who love to win, but they get a lot more satisfaction of the team winning than the individual, and the organization winning than the individual. And look, we make mistakes. I don't know any firm out there that's perfect, that has a wonderful track record. I certainly have had my share of mistakes. And I think when we're at our best is when we make those mistakes. There's no finger pointing as to who made the mistake. We collectively say, we let the organization down. Where did we let the organization down? How did we let the organization down? Not in a individual or personal, but process and capabilities and approach. And coming at it in that way, when you're dissecting or looking at your successes, when you're trying to kind of go back and look and coming at it from the team orientation as opposed to the individual orientation, is very, very helpful. And then we're really intentional about communicating those core values and living up to them, and how we allow folks and encourage folks to engage across the organization. It was easy when there were 5 people, 11 people, 18 people. When you're over 200 people, and we have most in Boston, but we have some in New York, we have some on the West Coast, it becomes more and more challenging. But long-winded way of saying, I think it's being really, really intentional about what you care about, being very true to those values, correcting, reinforcing, and finding the right people that fit. And it's not a fit for everybody, but I think the people who choose it for the long run. I think it's a moving target. I think our average partner tenure is 22 or 23 years. So people come and spend their career at Berkshire Partners and because they buy into that culture.
I'd like to talk about value creation and how you interact with your portfolio companies, the relationships that you emphasize. I'm sure some of these portfolio companies, you develop relationships before you even start to think about an investment. Maybe if you could tell us a little bit about what you look for in good opportunities and how management team plays into that, as well as then how you work with the company to grow it.
Yeah, I'll cover both of those. We have a very disciplined investment strategy. It's interesting. We have 4 industry groups. We only make 4 to 5 to 6 investments a year. So when you kind of break it down, it's 1.25 to 1.5 on average. So we can be really selective across those 4 industry groups. If we're saying we need to make 1 investment this year, or on average 1.25 every year. So we're very disciplined. We're very proactive and very intentional. So our approach in each of our industry groups is to have 3 to 5 subsectors where we are deep and have deep expertise, and shut out everything else. Try not to be distracted by the number of opportunities. I'll use healthcare as an example. The first thing we talk about in healthcare is where we are not going to invest. And we talk about the 3 or 4 subsectors where we want to have deep expertise, where we know that space better than anyone. And then we really have a top-down thesis as where do we see secular tailwinds or demand tailwinds that are going to provide real opportunities for growth in the industry. And then we look for the companies that are either the market leader in that space or a company that's very well positioned in gaining share and outgrowing the market. Those are kind of the standard discipline of that is where we are going to invest. And then below that, we ask ourselves, how many levers of growth, right? The more levers of growth, the better, both organic and non-organic. How durable is it? How resilient is it? How does it hold up in market cycles and situations, certainly in healthcare, legislative, other swipe of pen risk opportunities? And then what are the ways that we can influence and bring our value creation playbook to it, which I'll get to in a minute. The management piece and the engagement piece, we back a lot of founders, we back a lot of individuals who've been with the company a long time. Because we're so proactively focused and because we're so intentional, we are often engaging with these investment opportunities across the firm years before they become actionable. And so we're out spending time with these management teams 2-3 years, certainly a year in advance, trying to help them understand why we like their industry, why we like how they're positioned, how we like to engage, what we think about the competition in the space, what resources we think we can bring from our 40 plus years of experience in the space, whether that be relationships with customers or suppliers or talent or access, in the case of healthcare, to legislators or things of that nature. So we're engaging with these, I'll say, management teams and founders so far in advance that they're getting a chance to understand if we would be a good partner. We're getting a chance to understand not only how well do we think they are suited to run the company and help the company grow and accelerate. And that's not perfect because we're not in a full diligence, but we're understanding that. And we're getting a good sense for their receptivity to the engagement. And we're not a perfect fit for every investment opportunity. We understand that. We try not to have a formulaic approach, but we do have a value creation playbook and engagement style that we believe is helpful. We try to be really upfront about that with these teams well in advance before they're choosing a partner. And as you know, oftentimes they are choosing at the end between, multiple really great firms. And so by sitting down with them ahead of time, walking them through what we know about their industry, their business, and how we think we can help them in that approach, it allows us to hit the ground running very quickly, often between sign and close, well ahead of time. And that's something that's evolved over the last decade plus. I also happen to sit on our investment committee, and we just won't react. Of course, there are things that bubble up that we don't know about. Of course, there are opportunities that we haven't heard about. We certainly don't know every company in each of our subsectors. But the response in the investment committee in that case is to say, let's learn about it. But the idea that that's going to make it through our investment decision process if we haven't been out in front for quarters to years is very, very, very low. Could happen, but we're just more likely to make a mistake there and or not know that we have the alignment. And then the way we talk about our value creation playbook, we kind of have 4 areas. The reason I said it's not 100% formulaic is within those 4 areas, some companies might benefit from some of those areas more than others. Some may not feel that they need it. Some may want more than that. And then there are others around that. One big bucket we call quality growth. And that's really just how do we think about go-to-market? How do we think about product and market adjacencies? How do we think about operational scalability? So really coming in and engaging around how do we accelerate your organic growth and the levers that we can pull. And that's pretty much across the board. and bringing our team as a smallest side. We have about a 40-person portfolio support team within Berkshire, and then a whole orbit of folks around that. So organic growth. In the last 3 years, there's been a lot more focus on what I'd call data AI enablement. So both defensively, but hopefully more offensively. What are you doing today? What's the market doing in around agentic AI or other technologies? What capabilities do you have? And then what do we have internal within Berkshire, which we've got a really nice team that we've built out and are continuing to add to. And then what else can we supplement with folks? Really to think about defensively, making sure that we don't have any flanks exposed on A, and then offensively, what else can we do with that technology, either to provide better service, better scale, things of that. The third category is what we call winning team. That's really sitting down, and this does happen during the due diligence phase and from on, and really saying, if we want to accelerate growth, if we want to scale the business, we really like the idea of scaling ahead. So we'll often be talking about, let's put the capabilities and the scale in place today, even though you don't need it, you will grow into it. And that's not often the mindset of a founder or smaller firms. It's really much our mindset of how do we put ourselves in a position to build ahead, because we should be able to grow into it. And that can include talent assessment. It can certainly include bringing in talent, thinking about how you build up functional areas. In healthcare, I found that there are usually 3 or 4 functional areas that get a lot of attention and a few functional areas that get a lot less attention. And going back to that winning team, we really like the idea that all functions within a business should be firing on the cylinders to help it grow. And then the last is what we call built to last. And that's really making sure that our enterprise systems, our FP&A, our KPI environment, our cyber defenses are in place. So those are the 4 ways that we come to it. And as I said, we can bring those opportunities, and it's not 100% all of them across every company, but we have those capabilities within Berkshire to bring. And we'd like to, as I said, be in a position to deploy them and understand where they might fit before we make that investment.
The area of operational support and having in-house a team of folks with a variety of backgrounds, skill sets, experience, and being able to kind of help your portfolio companies by making these gaps disappear, because you're able to kind of fill in and strategically think about the business and operationally help it. And firms differ in their operational support or bench strength. Maybe if you could tell us a little bit more, because I feel like that may be a way in which, correct me if I'm wrong, you win maybe in a competitive deal process.
To answer that last part, it may help us win 2 different ways. And tell me if I'm not answering your question, because I want to make sure that I am. I think one way is, look, founders, management teams, they want to win. They're in this position. They want to grow. And, there are some that basically will say, like, I've got it. I'm looking for capital. I'm not really interested in a lot of outside help. By the way, there are plenty of those that are incredibly successful. I'm not saying that they need to have a private equity partner. Those are less likely to be a fit for us. Not impossible, depending on if there's a few areas. I think those that we found that are open to and oftentimes embrace and don't want to give those resources back are the companies that perform the best. Management teams who are saying, can I get access to this? Can I get access to this? How long can I keep this capability? So I do think if there's an alignment around what we can bring to help them grow, and a management team that is focused on taking whatever resources are available to them to help them grow, there's good alignment in terms of them choosing a partner. That's one part. I'd say the other second part to this is we are in a competitive industry. I'd love to tell you that, we secure most of these investments outside of a process. We have a very good track record of making investments outside of a process, but we do compete in processes. We're looking for companies that are really well positioned and they have multiple opportunities. And I do think as we're underwriting those opportunities, and because, again, we're out in front and proactive and have time to assess where and how we can help, I'll just say, accelerate growth or expand growth. It could be margin, it could be top line, it could be other free cash flow. We can factor that into our purchase price. We can factor that into our risk reward trade-off. We can factor that into what is it that we think we can pay to invest in this business. And obviously, the more we think we can help that management team grow, the higher positioned we are to possibly win on that front as well. So it really takes both.
I'd like to touch on healthcare. That's your area of expertise. What areas of healthcare are you most interested in, where you spend the most time?
I love when I hear people invest in healthcare. I always say, okay, which subsectors, right? Because it's just really hard to cover the world of healthcare. And I said it before, when I am kind of coaching and working with our younger team members and they're excited about certain areas, the conversation there we'll have is, if you're excited about an area and we don't have expertise there, I love that idea. Help us understand why you're excited in that area. What are the elements of that you think are going to provide for interesting tailwinds in the industry or growth or other things? And we will mine those areas. So I'll get to the four where we're currently focused, but the way our teams are set up is we like to have 3 or 4 subsectors active at a given time where we have deep expertise, where we've spent years, where we've been highly active, where we've formed relationships, and we are pursuing top targets within that. There's probably 1 or 2 areas, RJ, that we've looked at, we spent time in. We either didn't find the right business, maybe the business wasn't as good as we thought, maybe the industry wasn't as good as we thought, maybe something changed, marketplace, regulatory, and we're sunsetting those. And then we have 2 or 3 at any given time that we're digging deep in, where we're probably not ready to make an investment, but we're thinking 2-3 years out the road of where do we see healthcare going? Where might there be opportunities? And as we think about the next fund, where might those opportunities come? So I like that arc of how our team is investing in understanding the broader marketplace. The 4 where we're deepest today, currently right now, would be pharma services, where we continue to see just long-term outsourcing trends by biotech and pharma. We've made a number of investments in that space and have formed a number of relationships. And we found that within pharma and biotech, if they're willing to outsource it, for the most part, they don't mind. And there may be even advantages if you're providing that service across many customers in pharma, because they benefit from that. And that's usually a really good place to be. So we spend a lot of time in pharma services and biotech. The second would be what we generally call provider. We've made a number of investments in and around provider, which is, is just code for a physician or a clinician or a healthcare provider of some level, whether that's ophthalmology, anesthesia, veterinary services, et cetera. That's been a deep area for a lot of healthcare investors for a number of years. I would say that I think the balance of power between provider and payer has shifted in the last few years. It's more and more challenging to be a provider. Payers have found themselves in a position to have more leverage, whether that's a result of the No Surprises Act, some other industry fundamentals that have changed. I think you're seeing a shift in provider to value-based care. And we're certainly, as we look at things in provider, thinking about where value-based care plays out. But the value-based care models are still fairly early, and there are as many misses as there are successes. Mm-hmm. And so we're being really thoughtful about where we bring our provider expertise into that space. We talk about HCIT. I know that's also one of those areas where people say HCIT, and I say, where within HCIT? We really like providing technology services into the payer. Again, it's almost a little bit like pharma services. The payer will basically say, I don't want to do that, or I need this help. I want to outsource it. And they're fine if you do it across multiple payers and or the provider. And occasionally you can find opportunities that do both. Our investment in Ensemble, which does revenue cycle management, is between the payer and the provider. So that's where we spend time with HCIT. And when I go back to this team of teams, when we engage there, we'll bring in our tech team. And it's really rewarding to go in front of a management team and have healthcare expertise and tech expertise when you're talking to a company that's providing tech capabilities into a healthcare provider. And the 4th at this time is what we generally refer to as employer health, which is a little bit more in the payer services place. But it's no surprise that small, medium, even large businesses are wrestling with the cost of the healthcare for their employers. And there are a number of really interesting business models out there today to help employers provide tremendous care for their employees at better cost or captive cost or things of that nature. So those are the 4 areas.
Mm-hmm. We're coming up on the tail end of the conversation. I have 2 final questions, but before I ask these last 2, could you maybe share with us an example of a portfolio company you invested in, worked with, that gives you a sense of satisfaction, like you were really able to bring to bear everything Berkshire has to offer and build up a company for the long term?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I'm smiling as you say it because I was trying to think about which one to pick. I'll pick Ensemble, and I want to caveat it up front. Everything that we've talked about in this value creation playbook, none of it matters if the management team's, not terrific and the management team's doing the work. And we know at the end of the day, we're investing behind those management teams and they're the ones doing the work. And we're just there to try to support them in any way we can. Ensemble, we invested in roughly 4 years. We're in partnership with Warburg Pincus. It's been a great partnership. I think we're very aligned in how we think about the business, very aligned and complementary in the different value creation opportunities. It's been a lot of fun to work with that team and to be partnered alongside them with Ensemble. And I won't be able to cover it all, but Ensemble's founder-led, Judson Ivey started the business, has built a tremendous team. It was brought into and acquired by Bon Secours Mercy as kind of a captive RCM provider. Tremendous CEO there, John Starcher. And then John and Judson had the foresight to realize that it had tremendous commercial application outside of not only Bon Secours, but a large number of hospital systems in acute care settings, and built up a more commercial capability and then brought it out to invest behind. A great team to start with, a great business model, very well positioned. You know, when we talk about that pursuit, we pursued John and Judson for 3 years. We spent a lot of time trying to make that investment and felt very fortunate to have the opportunity to do so when it came. And by the time that opportunity came, Judson knew a lot about how we engaged and how we would like to engage and where we thought we could add value. And Judson is a learning being. He loves to think about where the company can go. He loves to think creatively about how to find different ways to push the envelope forward, and also really good at looking over his shoulder to make sure he's not missing anything. So I think he really embraced the idea of having a partner who wanted to kind of be alongside for figuring those things out. I'd say we should ask him, because I'm always a little bit reluctant to say that, but I think that the playbook that I kind of went through around quality growth and winning team and built to last would fit. I'd say most recently where we've had a lot of fun together, and it's really at Judson's lead, has been, they've always been a technologically forward company, but how you bring new technologies and AI to bear across what is a fairly heavy process-oriented business when you're thinking about how providers get paid by payers. And so for the last kind of 2 years, we've been working together with members of the Berkshire team, third parties, and the management team to really embed technology that we've created, technology that we've acquired, and technology that we've leased or rented to really help them continue to drive AI and other technology into the business for the benefit of their hospital system clients. So that's not one that we were doing 10 years ago. When I go back to my original statement of 40 years and how do you continue to get better, but having those set of capabilities to work alongside Judson's leadership and vision there has been really fun to watch. And, it's kind of interesting because it happened over a period of time where you can see tremendous change through his desire to say, let's be the leader in this space. Let's get out in front of it. And what resources does Berkshire have? What resources and fairness does Warburg have? And then what else do we need to go out and find and buy and rent and lease and create? So I know it's a very specific example, but I'm smiling as I say it, and all credit to that management team.
Excellent. Last two questions. One is, can you tell us about a person who has had a profound influence on you?
Can I say more than one?
Sure.
I'd have to give credit to my parents for sure. They were very much, still are very much hard work and do the right thing, and so I give them credit for that. That's, I think, a big part of why I love working at Berkshire, because it's, do the right thing. I had the good fortune of working with all 5 founding partners, and I learned a tremendous amount from all of them. Richard Lubin, who's been a mentor to me, he just taught me so many ways to think about how, I'll just say, the other side was thinking. So, we all go into these situations with the view of how we are going to approach something and how we are going to influence something or how we're going to, make our points. And he's tremendous at a number of things, but his ability to kind of stop the conversation and put yourself in the shoes of the other party as you're thinking through how that engagement was going to end up and where you get to that win the right way answer was very powerful, and something I try to remind myself to do very frequently. So one of the many things I learned from Richard, and I could go on and on with the other 4 founding partners, but since you asked.
Last question. Can you tell us about a charity, cause, or other endeavor that you're passionate about?
Yeah, thank you. There are 2. About a dozen years ago, my wife and I found ourselves kind of spread all over philanthropically, which is great. There's so many wonderful causes and a lot of opportunities to help. And when you hear about things, you want to say yes. About a dozen years ago, we said to ourselves, why don't we pick 1 or 2 things that mean a lot to us collectively and individually and try to put most of our time and energy and philanthropy behind that. And those 2 are Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, which is in Boston, I think of as the best cancer hospital and research center in the world. And I've been on the board there for a little over a decade. And we've put a lot of time and energy into that. And it's a place that feels really good to be involved around. As someone who invests in healthcare, it's actually really interesting to get to see things from the inside as well. But they do tremendous work and they're saving lives. And it's hard not to want to do more to help an organization that's saving lives every day. And then the second would be McLean Hospital, where my wife has been on the board for a number of years. I think of them as the foremost mental health hospital research center and teaching center in the world. We're lucky. Both of those are right in our backyard in Boston. And it's fun to compare notes. Connie's been heavily involved there, and we support both of those opportunities. And, you can't do enough to support mental health and the mental health issues that are facing our world and our children. So thank you for asking. There are a couple of areas that have been really important to us. So thank you.
Wonderful. Well, Chris, I want to thank you again for taking the time to chat with us today. This has been a great conversation.
Thank you for asking. I enjoyed it very much.